Loving oneself. Sort of an odd topic to talk about because, as, living organisms, of course we wish ourselves well, right? Why wouldn't we? But then this concept of loving oneself and how to do that seems to imply that there's two of us somehow. The self that's trying to be loving and the self that's trying to be worthy of that sort of judgmental kind of love. You know? So which is it? Which, are we both? Are we one or the other? Are we neither? But that's the game that we mostly play with ourselves. It's a matter of self-reflection where we sort of mentally step out from ourselves and turn around and look back at ourselves and basically ask, how am I doing? Am I doing it right? Am I getting there? Am I improving? Am I succeeding? Am I getting further along the path? So this sort of self-reflection is something that we humans have learned how to do, probably not all that far back in our evolution. So we're still not that good at it. I mean, we do it all the time, but we don't realize that we're doing it, and we don't distinguish between doing it usefully and doing it sort of unconsciously and repetitively. How am I doing now? Am I operating from awakeness now, or am I operating from ego now? Sort of this self-evaluation. So it has everything to do with, I think, the sense of worthiness. Am I worthy of my love? Am I worthy of that? And then we start thinking, well, what do I have to do to be worthy of it? And we develop strategies how to do that. Maybe we are successful. Maybe we put together a nice, coherent philosophy or intellectual structure that we feel makes sense out of things. Maybe we decide to be in relationship, have a family, and that becomes our circumstance that we find worthy of loving ourselves. I'm doing this well. I feel good about it. Right? Some people find their sense of self-worth in bodily sensations, whatever that looks like. Usually in the sense of more, better, more often. Some people find a sense of sort of self-worth when they can have a nice, steady, emotional state, safe, predictable. Feel like, okay, things are working. Some people seem to find great pleasure in emotional turmoil and drama. It feels like, well, I'm really alive because I'm constantly in a state of drama. Different strategies, mostly unconscious, to try to feel good enough about my own state of being, my own organism, that I feel like, I'm worthy of loving myself. I feel good about it. But we can see that it all has to do with how we define that. It's not something that the outside world is determining, unless, of course, we're willing to sort of outsource our self-judgment to other people. They'll tell us, how am I doing? How lovable am I? You know, or we might even outsource it to, I don't know, some divine being, let's say God, and they'll judge me. They'll tell me how well I'm doing, whether I'm worthy of not, whether I'm worthy of love, right? And what's the basis for that? I mean, is it one particular grandiose, wonderful moment where I surrender and feel totally in touch with life and grateful to be alive? Is that sufficient, a one-time feeling, or is it necessary to, I don't know, do it, once a year, or maybe every night when we go to bed? Are we judged on how we did that day? Or is it more sort of like a, lifetime batting average? How did we do overall compared to what? So you can see this whole movement of sort of from some external viewpoint, whether it's our own self-reflection or the view that we get of ourselves through other people's eyes, or what we imagine, some divine judgmental being has of us. And then the question is, how good is good enough? How good do I have to be worthy of loving myself? So we can see that it's a matter of, what we decide the circumstances need to be, and then how well we're doing at that, and then how life is allowing those circumstances to be possible in our own lifetime. So it's all very complicated in a way, and it's never solid. It's never resolved. It's not like, well, I did this one beautifully surrendered deed in my life and I'm good, I'm good for the duration, because the mind can come back in and question that and say, well, what about now? Is that enough? How much is enough? So we can begin to see all of the ways that the mind can come up with to try to question our right to be alive, right? Our right to exist, our right to be here and feel good about it. Does that resonate with anybody? To have those kinds of feelings about, questioning one's value. Where does that yardstick come from? I mean, who decides how high to set the bar? But there's the sense of, well, if I don't hold myself to some standard, then, who knows what I might do, right? There's a sense of that. I can, another way of saying that is, I don't quite trust myself to act with integrity unless I have some yardstick that I'm trying to measure up to, which most of the time I won't be able to meet. Right? And if we feel like we're, we set the bar too low, then we feel like, well, that doesn't really prove anything. And then so we set it a little higher, and then it feels unattainable, and then I don't feel good about myself. So we can see all the ways that we can create the standards by which we then judge ourselves. So we get to play the judge, the prosecutor, and the defendant. We get to play all the roles. They're all self-created. Right? And when we see how that operates most of the time, there doesn't appear to be a way out of it. if there's this underlying sense where we question our self-worth, there's never a sense of, well, I've done enough, and now I can nudge the dial over to the worthy side of the spectrum. There's never that sense. It's always like, yeah, but I could have done better. What about that thing I did 10 years ago? What about that? So we can see sort of the trap there. As long as we're trying to resolve this on the level of ego, level of thinking mind, the level of psychology, there's no end to it. And it's, I appreciate when people are trying to love themselves, to feel better about themselves. Great, wonderful, no problem. It's certainly better than people, abusing themselves, mental abuse of themselves. Of course, just this willingness to try harder to love. This package is admirable. Right? But what we're talking about here tonight is not trying to do our best to feel good about this sort of, existence that we can pick holes in. Or the real natural state, as the Taoists call it, is when there's a sense of effortlessness, a sense of as-isness. It doesn't require a certain performance to qualify, to feel that sense of being embraced by life, right? Being loved. Whether we do it ourselves or whether there's a sense of life is supporting us. Okay, so if our goal is this natural state, the effortless state, then we need a different strategy, right? And the strategy that we can consider is by looking at the awareness itself, and instead of looking at our limitations and foibles and past mistakes and everything, instead of looking at that from a judgmental mental position, right, looking at it from the perspective of awareness. The perspective of awareness here is this, limited, thoroughly conditioned, doing the best it can, body-mind, right? From the perspective of awareness, there's a certain compassion for that, because it's not coming from a judgmental place. It's what is aware of whatever judgmental thoughts happen to be going through our head. Yes? It understands the forcefulness, the power behind conditioned behavior and how difficult it is for the body-mind, especially as we get older, to change that kind of behavior and mental patterning and repetitive thought processes. So from the perspective of awareness, it is okay. It's not judging at all. It's aware of whatever judgments might be happening in our own head, whatever mental, self-reflective judgments, the sticky ones. It can see that, but from the perspective of awareness, it is just as it is. It's not demanding anything. It's not withholding love. It's not waiting to give love. It is love. It is loving. Not the human possessive kind of loving, but just by loving in this sense, I just mean the unwillingness to turn away from anything. Right? The willingness to be present for everything. Non-judgmentally, you know. I mean, imagine having a lover like that was unwilling to turn away. Would be there regardless. That degree of steadfastness. Who would want that? But this is awareness as it moves in the world. It's the love and awareness aren't two different things. They're two ways of sort of trying to understand as best we can the nature of this consciousness that is innate to all of us. When we step back into our own beingness, it feels more like spaciousness, open, aware. When it moves in the world, moves outward, that movement outward as it comes from that sense of beingness feels loving, right? Feels open-hearted, feels generous, it feels caring. It has compassion. Compassion, not something that we're trying to do. Awareness isn't trying to do anything. It's sort of like, the sun up in the sky. The sun, isn't intending to warm our face when the sun's out. But that's the nature of it, right? And it's the same with awareness. Its nature is to, when it moves outward in the world, its nature is to be compassionate. Its nature is to be non-judgmental. It doesn't have an agenda in that sense. It's not trying to change anything, but just that light of awareness has a quality, a totally mysterious quality, that does change things. It's, you could say it's the nature of that immensity of love, non-judgmental love. From the perspective of that, viewing our conditioning, of course there's compassion. So this is actually the resolution of the question of, how do we love ourselves? Like I say, it's fine to try to do that from the, psychological, personal self, trying to work things out so you're okay with things. That's fine. But what I'm talking about is something far more sustainable, with far less effort and far less prone to error. And that is to recognize that what's really living this life is this spaciousness, is this immensity of awareness. And within that, there is this sense of loving presence. It's what, in spiritual scriptures, it's what's called God's love, except God isn't a distant, judgmental entity. It is what we are. Right? And it can be felt. It can be felt as this awareness, this consciousness, this aliveness, this spacious emptiness that has the capacity of being willing to include everything without trying. That's why it's effortless. It's as it is. It's not that we have to achieve that state. It's recognizing what's already happening. That awareness is already happening. We just aren't willing to give it credit. We think, no, it's me. I'm doing it. Just another thought. In the meantime, awareness is fully present for that thought as it is for all other thoughts. If it wasn't present, you wouldn't know you were having that thought. So it's just the nature of this innate consciousness that we all are already, as is, that has the capacity to love indiscriminately, love unconditionally. This form, yeah.